What was your craziest, "I thought about it and it happened" story? When I was 17, a friend and I were driving around town in his 80-something Toyota Tercel. This car was a total piece of crap and had had a seriously loud knock in the engine for weeks. We had been out tooling around for maybe an hour and the knocking noise was getting to me. We're sitting at a red light in the center of a 3-lane road about 20 minutes from home when I exclaimed, "Wouldn't it be some crap if this piece of crap car just went bang and blew the hell up?" As the light turns green, my friend chuckled and said something like, yeah, that would suck." The car in front of us starts to move and my buddy pushes the gas and bang! That piece of crap threw a piston and died right in the middle of the road. He looked at me like, "What the frick did you do that for?" And we both laughed our butts off for a few seconds. We pushed his car into a nearby church parking lot with the help of a few onlookers and took the plates off and left it there. That was over a decade ago, and as far as I know, he never heard another thing about it. No idea what eventually became of that car. I worked at a Starbucks in a Lucky grocery store. We had a guy that would come in 4 to 5 times a week and get a small coffee. We'd give it to him for the refill price, and he'd sit in the store for hours. He was homeless and smelled pretty bad and was pretty scruffy looking with long hair and a beard, but he seemed nice enough. After like a year of this, the store manager came to me and told me that if I saw Nathan, the homeless guy, to call the store manager because he wanted to talk to him. That night I had a dream that I was at work and Nathan was there as well, but as an employee. Nothing super eventful about the dream until I went to work the next day and saw we had a new employee. He was sitting at the table in front of the Starbucks kiosk and one of my coworkers was talking to him. I didn't really pay much attention until my coworker called me over and said, "Doesn't he look completely different without his beard?" Mind blown. Apparently, my store manager figured out that if he was going to be chilling in the store all day, he might as well give him a job. He bought him some clothes, got him a haircut and a shave, a gym membership for showers, and started helping him look for a place to stay. I never really had a positive or negative opinion on the store manager before that point, but mad respect for that. 5 years later, Nathan still works there. He outlasted me. A few years ago, I was going to the grocery store with my dad and I asked him, "Is there any part of the body that can't get cancer?" "I don't know, we'll have to look it up later." Later, getting back into the car, we turn on the radio. It's Tuesday, which means it's time for our trivia fact of the week. The lens of the eye is the only body part that cannot get cancer. I really thought that story was going to end with one of you getting cancer of the right buttock or something. Me too, commenter. I was honestly kind of dreading whatever the outcome here was, but this is much better. I would never believe this story had happened if I wasn't present for it. When I was in high school, me and a buddy were driving back from Long Beach with his mum. About halfway home, this butthole starts riding his mum's rear bumper. She gets really nervous and tries to get out of his way by changing lanes. The jerk guns it and changes lanes around her, scaring the crap out of us and nearly forcing her into the center divider. Well, he gets in front of us and slows the frick down to like 1 mile per hour higher than we're going, and my friend's mum is almost in tears and is just screaming, "What the frick, butthole?" So my buddy goes, "Don't worry about it, Mom. We'll all laugh our butts off when he blows his tire and wrecks his car right now." The words had barely left his mouth when, boom! His left front tire completely blows and he tanks his crappy Nissan right into the K-rail. We had to swerve to avoid hitting him. Needless to say, it was an eerie ride home. Watching Jeopardy, the final Jeopardy subject was science. During the commercial break, I said, "I bet it's tungsten." The answer was tungsten. I had this at a pub quiz once. The quizmaster explained that in the next round each question would be a line from a song and the answer was the next line of the song. Before a single line was read out, I wrote, "Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality," in the answer space for question 1. I was right. I had a recurring dream when I was a little kid. I would be sitting on my dad's shoulders and would be walking down this really narrow hallway. For some reason, I had this inherent knowledge that there were monsters in it, but my dad kept them away. The dream always ended before we got out. When I was 5, I had the same dream except we got to the end of the hallway and my dad just suddenly disappeared. I looked for him for a while, but to no avail. I woke up and found out he had died while I was sleeping. When I was 11, my grandpa had been sick for a while and he was in the hospital. One weekend, I was at a friend's place about an hour and a half from home. Everything was fine, but I suddenly just knew something wasn't right. I called my mom and she assured me that everything was fine and my grandpa was stable. I still convinced my friend's mom to drive me home right away though, and I made her drive me to my grandparents instead of home. Sure enough, when I got there, my whole family was there and my grandpa had just passed away. I found out afterwards that when I'd called my mom, it had just happened about 5 minutes before, but she didn't want to break the news to me over the phone. When I was in first grade, we were playing a Jeopardy-style game with actual buzzers. The rules of the game were that if you buzz in too early, you have to answer the question anyway and don't get another chance at it. Well, a question had just finished and it was that transition period between questions. As soon as the teacher was about to say the first word of the next question, I hit my buzzer unknowingly. My teacher stopped herself from reading the question and looked at me for an answer. I said, "Triangle." I was right. I was about 6 years old and playing with my brand new pet bunny rabbits that my dad bought for me after church. I turned to him and said, "Daddy, I'm glad that you and Mummy are still married. So many of my friends' parents are divorced." My dad responds, "Actually, there's something we need to talk about." And that's how I learned my parents were getting divorced. I fell in love with a girl freshman year of college and we were together until the end of sophomore year. We reached a breaking point because she came from a very traditional Indian family, and she was very in favor of being married young. I loved her like crazy, but at the same time I knew I wasn't ready for all that she was hoping for, and I didn't think it was fair to keep getting her hopes up that way. I was 20 years old and I'd never had a job for God's sakes. It was a brutal breakup because as much as I tried to explain myself, any girl will take that as a rejection, as saying somehow that she wasn't good enough. We were both pretty heartbroken, but we realized eventually that trying to be friends would only make things harder, so we agreed to not talk anymore. One of the last things I said that it wasn't impossible for it to work out someday, but we both needed to try and live on our own for a while and give a chance for being with other people. We were both kind of over-dependent on each other and we both needed to mature and learn to be our own person. We lost touch for 2 years, saw each other very rarely and spoke not at all. We dated other people. At the end of senior year, I'd just gotten out of a really bad relationship where I'd been cheated on. It wasn't that bad because I wasn't really in love with the girl, but it still felt crappy. The week before exams, I had a dream about the old girl where we ran into each other at this little coffee shop we always used to go to and read and hang out in. In the dream, all we did was talk and hold hands a little. The next day, I picked up the books I needed to study and went to that coffee shop. 15 minutes later, she walked in and sat down without seeing me. She was studying too. I walked up to the counter and brought another drink and looked over just to be sure it was her. I couldn't believe it. She saw me and of course at that point it was impossible not to say hello. We talked for 2 hours. She had had some bad relationships too. We found out we had gotten jobs in the same city. We didn't hold hands because that would have been bizarre, but we could both feel it. Dated, married, been together 5 years. I don't believe in God, but I still can't believe how perfectly things worked out. A lot of these are about speaking disasters or tragedies into existence, or coincidences of those nature, so it's nice to get another cute one in. When I was 14 or 15, I was sitting with this girl I'd just started hanging out with. We're waiting for our ride home and she talks about missing her brother, and I said something about him showing up for Christmas, not realizing he was very estranged, 3 years, from the family. Awkward moments ensue, we get rides home, no big deal. Flash forward to 7 a.m. Christmas morning, she calls me freaking out because he showed up at the family door. The first laptop I ordered arrived a day early when I was out of the house, so I came home to find a little slip on my door saying they'd try again tomorrow. The next day I woke up only to find that I'd slept in and missed the shipment again. I was pretty annoyed but just set my alarm for the next day. For some reason I missed the FedEx guy for the 3rd day in a row and I'm just fuming. I decide to go for a run to vent my anger, and while running I think to myself, wouldn't it be awesome if I saw the FedEx truck and got my laptop? After half an hour, I turn the corner of an intersection and see the FedEx truck and the FedEx guy walking towards it. I excitedly dash up to him and explain my situation to him while gasping for air. He remembers the package, finds it, and then hands it to me after I sign for it. Such a good day. Sitting in class, Professor pulls up Windows Media Player to play us a video on improper call signaling. He pauses with the mouse hovering over Resume Previous Playlist button, and I think, oh crap, what if it's adult flicks? That'd be hilarious. Turns out it was more than just that. It was some intense butt action with a ridiculously huge marital aid. I laughed very hard. My friend showed me a picture of his new girlfriend. I told him, damn, Ronald, once she realizes she's too hot for you, it's over, man. She broke up with him the next day. He has looked at me accusingly ever since. Sitting at lunch with some change, I asked my friend, how many times on average do you think I'd have to toss these coins for them to all land on heads? I had about 7 or 8 coins. He starts getting into the math required and thinking out loud about it. I comment, I bet it's just 1, and I toss the coins. They all end up heads. Yeah, I was right. It was only 1. During post-party night walking, I told a friend who was walking on the empty road, you're going to die. For the first time in his life, he listened to me, did a step to his left, and got back to safety. 2 seconds later, a car traveling at more than 130 kilometers per hour came out from nowhere and plowed through the space he had been standing in 2 seconds prior. Final Destination 6. I mean, he's still gonna die now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was about 8. My teacher had asked me to deliver an envelope of some sort to the principal's office in the middle of the school day. My school had at its center a single long hall, with my classroom near one end and the principal's office at the other. As a child, the hall seemed absurdly long, like a mile. Class was in session, so I was walking down this hall all alone, my footsteps echoing, quite surreal. It suddenly occurred to me that I was walking quite close to one wall, and that if a teacher were to fling open their doors, I'd be knocked silly. Just then, a teacher flung open her door, knocking me silly. These were big, old, heavy doors, and the energy transfer to my head was significant. In my memory, both my feet left the ground, though this seems unlikely in retrospect. I landed on my butt and was momentarily stunned. Our eyes locked, the teacher's and mine, for an instant, then I burst out laughing uncontrollably. The synchronicity struck me as hilarious, even the pain of being cold-cocked by a massive school door couldn't suppress my hilarity. I believe my reaction led the teacher to believe I'd suffered brain damage. It took quite some time to convince the various concerned school officials that I was unharmed, if silly. I was talking with a group of friends outside of an Expendables show in Santa Cruz. We were smoking cigs and making jokes when one of my buddies gets our attention and says, "Watch this, I'm gonna pull this girl's shirt down with my mind." He made a funny concentrating face and we all laughed and looked at the girl about 15 feet away from us on the porch. She was mid-conversation with what looked like a good friend, who was male, and slowly but surely her loose top slid over. With each hand motion or exclamation, her top inched over slightly. After about a minute and a half, her right fun chest bit was fully exposed. We cheered and laughed and couldn't believe it. The guy who was talking to her noticed but was too embarrassed to say anything. She finally put it away when some chick from a nearby table made a comment about it so loud that she took notice. But she was standing there with one of her tots out for a good few minutes. By the end of it, everyone on the porch was looking at it. She was a really hot girl with a great mid-sized rack, so I guess that happens a lot. People staring. I kind of felt bad because she got really embarrassed, but wow, it was funny. In college, I was watching Eurotrip with my buddy. The Pope had been sick, and during the part where they make Vatican City think the Pope is dead, I turned to my friend and said, "Man, wouldn't it be weird if the Pope died while we were watching this?" His time of death was almost exactly then. I found out the next day. In short, I killed Pope John Paul II. Wait until the Catholics hear about this one. You're in for it, Buster. Every time I say, "I thought, insert celebrity name here, was dead," they die 3 days later. Unfortunately, I have to actually believe they were dead. I've said I thought Tom Cruise was dead about 7 times and nothing has happened. I'm really sorry about Johnny Cash, though. Quickly, someone convince this person that James Corden is dead. Stat! Oh, I'm kidding. Mostly. Not really pre-thought or said, but it was the craziest thing ever. My friend and I were at Fridays, and he was being super rambunctious and obnoxious while eating his salad. For some reason, he thought it would be a good idea to poke a tomato with his fork and then fling it at me as hard as he could. During his fork up past his shoulder, my friend seriously whipped his tomato across the table with all his might. My first reaction was to sort of turn my head, anticipating the thwack sound the wet vegetable would make as it hit me. But that sound never came, there was no sudden thud and no tomato hit me. I sat there fork in hand wondering what the frick happened. Somehow that giant hunk of tomato had zoomed across the table and stuck itself onto my fork in the exact same way it was on his. Had we been professional lacrosse players planning the perfect pass, we could never have executed it as flawlessly as had happened. It was the most beautiful demonstration of Newtonian physics my then 17-year-old self had ever experienced. And yes, a tomato is a fruit, I made an error. But guess what? I'm not changing the story. Went to college and worked at a grocery store in Bellingham, Washington State. My co-workers and I were talking in the break room before a shift and the subject of celebrities came up. We talked about how celebrities might be a-holes because they had to deal with sycophants constantly bothering them. Then someone brought up Ryan Stiles, who lives near Bellingham and is owner of the Upfront Theatre, and how he would never shop at the store by the college campus, probably because he doesn't want to be hassled by college noobs. After our conversation, we left to go to our check stands, and within a few minutes, Ryan Stiles walks in. Unbelievable. Regular guy, wears blue jeans, sneakers, and a casual shirt. Really nice too. I was hoping I'd get to help him just to see if he would say something funny, but my friend did instead. About 7 years ago, I was still in high school and living with my mum, my brother, and my younger sister. My parents got a divorce about a year and a half before, and my dad kind of screwed us. My mum was unemployed, but going back to school with less than a year of schooling left. She was 48 at the time. We had no money, no food, no nothing. We've always been a poor family growing up, so it wasn't anything new. Unfortunately, we couldn't live where we were living anymore and had to move. This was the first move without my dad, so it was kind of the toughest. I remember day after day, my mum would cry wondering how she would feed us, move the house, care for us, get money for bills and other things. I remember asking her what we were going to do or how we'd pay for anything. She had no answer. She went to get the mail a day after. She always avoided the mailbox because of bills, and when she did, she found a letter with a check in it for $6,000. She was employed at an insurance firm where she'd met my dad some 20 years earlier, and as a perk for working there, you're given stock options. My mum forgot about the stock options, and they tracked her down 20 years later to give her the money, and single-handedly saved us from being homeless. My mum made that $6,000 go a long way. We happily moved to a cheaper home, and everything is okay again. We were at a poker table playing poker once, and I was winning $100 to $150 from my mates. The dealer was next to me, and he was like, "Man, you're totally cheating." He was joking, of course. He was dealing the community cards, and I was like, "Next card is the 3 of spades." Next card was the 3 of spades. Best moment ever. When I was a kid, every time I thought about a certain episode of The Simpsons, it was the one that would come on that evening. For example, I would imagine a scene or joke from the one where Lisa gets braces, and it would come on. I thought I was psychic, but I never could use my power for good. Sometimes I pretend like I have a bazooka. This happens when I'm in the car with my girlfriend on our frequent and boring 4-hour trips to home and back from college. Well, one time I shot my imaginary bazooka at a car in front of me. A second later, his tire blows out and he swerves off to the shoulder, staring at me all the while. He was probably as confused as I was. When I was about 8 or 9, my family went for a walk, driving our huge 15-passenger red van to the path. Mind you, this is a small walking path in the middle of nowhere that no one knows about except for our family and a few quad riders. For some reason, when my dad closed the door of the van, I got terrified that someone would steal our car. Obviously, none of my older brothers or sisters wanted to listen to a whining 8-year-old. After the walk, we came back and, as guessed, the van was gone. Disappeared. After filing a report with the local cops, we got rides back home and waited. Turned out the thief just needed a way to drive a few friends to an amusement park. The van was found a week later in the parking lot of Kennywood. One night I was stargazing while being outside for a smoke and saw a shooting star between 2 prominent landmarks. A few days later, I was outside again at the same spot and I remembered the shooting star and thought how cool it would be to see it again. A few seconds later, a shooting star crossed that same spot. Oh, and one time I predicted a joke on 2.5 Men. That isn't that hard though. You're not wrong. I don't think I saw a single funny or original joke in the one time I was subjected to that awful show. Come at me, haters. One time about 10 years ago, my buddy and I were about 15 or 16 at the time. We were standing on his front lawn waiting for my mum to pick me up when we heard a guy screech his tires and spin out on the top of the road leading to his house. Looked like he was trying to do donuts. We both looked up there thinking it was a car accident about to happen, but it was nothing, so I said, "I got excited. Would have been great to see that guy crash into a pole," for some cheap laughs. This guy couldn't have been moving faster than 10 miles an hour, so it would have ruined his day and nothing more. The guy straightens out and drives down the hill and then completely loses control of his car and slams it into a telephone pole about 30 feet from where we were standing. It was hair-raising. We still laugh about it to this day. Another one was about this guy I knew a while ago. He wasn't such a bad guy, but he had an abrasive side and he liked to rib me for a lot of little things. At first I didn't mind so much, but after a few months of it I got pretty tired of him. My friend brought him up in conversation one night in front of a bunch of people, and as a show of disapproval of him, I said, if he died tomorrow, I wouldn't care. Well, guess what happened the next morning? He died in a motorcycle crash after some butthole doped up on pills and driving on the wrong side of the road nailed him on a blind turn. I still feel crappy about the timing. Sat outside college with some friends when several police cars appeared very suddenly, surrounding a car in the middle of the road and forcing them to stop. One of my friends said sarcastically, "Watch, they'll get the automatic weapons out next." Now, this is the north of England. It's not all that often you see the police wield any sort of firearm around here. But sure enough, 6 or 7 officers arose from their vehicles with MP5s and pointed them straight at the back of the car they'd stopped. They dragged a man out of the car and put him in the back of one of the police cars. One of the officers got into the car they'd stopped and they all drove away. The whole thing lasted about 30 or 40 seconds, and we were all sat about 10 feet away. On September 11th, I said to a coworker, "Wouldn't it be crazy if another plane hit the tower?" I was at the game in 1998 that Kerry Wood struck out 20 batters. After he struck out the first hitter in the first inning, my friend looked at me and said, "Well, only 19 more to go." By the 9th inning, we had our entire section going insane as we counted down the last 2 strikeouts to 20. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.